What's going on, everyone? Vampyr Gaming here, and today we're going to be doing a tier list. However, this is going to be a little bit different. I know a lot of people have been putting these out, and I wanted to get one out here for you all as well, just to kind of share my insight and thoughts on the meta. This is pretty much like exclusively for Nationals, so it's going to be our Nationals tier list. We're not going to go through every single leader. I'm going to preface this with this. I want this to be the meat and potatoes, get you absolute value. And as you go approaching either the LCQ or Nationals here on Saturday 1, good luck. May we all find our way to the top cut. But on top of that, just all these leaders, I think, are ones that we could see in the top 64 within top cut. I think it's 128 top cut, but it might be 64 because I know this Nationals is a lot smaller than the previous one in terms of players. So we'll see TBD what top cut actually is. I'm sure it's out there. I just don't know. But we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the bit on the data side from Eggman, which is why we had the site up over there. And then we will just take a look at everything. But I'm going to share my thoughts, of course, on what these leaders are, what I think the representation is going to be. And we'll back it up with over here. So first, let's kind of just take a look at what's over here. Because the cool thing was Eggman gave us the leader breakdown, and you can see already 200 Doflamingo. So hands down, we know Doflamingo is going to be the most represented deck at the event. However, we do see high representation numbers in both Shanks and Monkey D. Luffy, but Shanks overall had the lowest conversion based off of representation, which I think speaks a lot about just the deck in general and just kind of how people are going to approach it. I know a lot of people are playing Mangali's build, and that's fine. I, of course, have like kind of my own build. I think he's right in his own ways, but I, of course, was a very fond of my build as well, and I think there's a nice little sweet spot. The great part about Shanks, you can kind of just, he's so flexible, and you can really tailor it for what you need. And then, of course, we do see that two smoker. We see Bonnie, and we see, of course, BY. I think BY is the underdog. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit more, but this gives us a great idea of what we're going to see. And then, of course, we see here the top cut. We see Dan winning with a Shanks list, which is pretty cool. We love to see Shanks, and I know he was playing the ace build, which I personally am a fan of as well. But let's go ahead, dive in. Of course, I'm going to put Shanks at tier 1. I think my friend Jansuko said it the best. It's funny because the leader is essentially, this is a living life at the absolute honest, and is the most honest deck. Every other deck feels like it has an advantage, but this is kind of like, you know, you're going through life, wife, kids, all of that, and just playing it, you know, just the regular way, which is fine. I know it's not tier S tier, it's not Doflamingo, but I do believe Shanks is really good, and with the correct practice, the correct skill, he can really go to distance. The big thing about Red was, and like where mirror matches came in, is really truly a battle of skill, and you could pretty much outplay your opponent, which is like what's so great about Red. It gives you a lot of opportunity, and the deck is very flexible, so it allows your deck building skills to shine, which is another reason why I am a fan of Red. Whereas every other color has set in stone, but Shanks super representative. He's a huge character, so he's meta, and he's a very popular character. So I think there's going to be a decent amount of representation, and you should be prepared. You should prep for this matchup because he will be there. You know, we see him win 2 events, the Booster Box tournament, and then also he won the Treasure Cup, so I'm sure there's going to be a decent amount of representation. Now, here's one of those leaders that I just really want to mention, because like everybody's talking about Smoker, but nobody's talking about the ST14 Luffy. And while Smoker does have Tashigi, which is a huge card, all I can think about is how great it was to play Black Luffy. Like, this Luffy just felt so good, and being a 6k leader versus like Doflamingo can be big. The big thing is this is really has a true to form like Whitebeard style big hand playing, which is of course weakness to Doflamingo. But I honestly, this is one of those decks I would not be surprised if we see it in top 64 or making top cut, because somebody just absolutely loves this deck, because I don't think it's too far off of Smoker. Now, I am once again, I put this in my tier list last time. I know a lot of people are coming back to the BY Luffy. We saw him in representation in both of these. He made top 32, and then on top of that, We had some also over here in the People's Card Shop as well. So I really think that this leader, like a lot of people have made the move to Dofi, which is a completely fair call. And, you know, they're welcome to do that. But yeah, it's just something keep in mind is I think there's going to be a decent amount of this. Don't be caught off guard when you're playing against this. Of course, Doflamingo, actually, in my opinion, Doflamingo does not have a good matchup into it, and there's not a ton of people playing Blackbeard. But Shanks, I also think, has a pretty good matchup into Luffy, just because of Gold Roger, and it forces Luffy to play different, because they have to keep one life, or they risk just being Rogered and have to have enough counter to be able to survive an onslaught. But I do believe, I know a lot of people are whipping this leader out. I know a lot of people are putting in the reps. A lot of people have already learned to play this leader, and it doesn't change. Raigo is also a very good card. Raigo is a heck of a card, and they're all like, I've seen lists with 4 Raigo. Doflamingo also, I think, S tier, because these two are just like overall, I think bar for bar, they don't have like bad matchups. Outside of like each other, these two are not great, but you of course have Pudding, which Pudding is also a phenomenal card to play against a BY. And yeah, I think there's going to be a ton of Dofi. I think as terms of representation, it's going to be a lot of Dofi, but I think we're going to see more BY than people expect in Top Cut. I think we're going to see more BY in Top Cut than people expect. Now, Smoker, I want to put him just like right here at tier 2, but I think I'm going to go tier 1. I'm going to go tier 1 because, again, it's like a fair leader, but without like Lucci in the way, because Lucci just kind of does what Smoker wants to do, but better. But with less Lucci in the landscape, we've got, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Tashigi's a heck of a card. Trash is a 4, Trash is a 5, and has counter. It's a big card in the deck. Card has a lot of value plays, and the card in the deck can draw. The deck can draw for all of its worth. And you get to play possibly cards like Kuzan, which are also really good. I think I would almost say Smoker's like 1.5. You know what? We'll go ahead. I'm going to just make 1.5, and I'll make 2. I think that's just slightly, this is just slightly more accurate. I think this is slightly more accurate. I'm going to put Bello at 2. And just kind of let that sink in. Bello made top 4. Bello, when they high roll, is just not losing. Bello with 4 life trigger is not losing. If you know how to play Bello and you have 4 life trigger, now you don't even have to pitch cards because the new yellow triggers, and you have a Karasu blocker, which they previously didn't have the ability to like play blockers. Now they have a blocker that's a swinger. And yeah. Bello Betty, I could see 1 Bello Betty, 2 Bello Betty in top 64. That would not surprise me. Just because if you're having a good day, if you're the luckiest man in the room and you're playing Betty, you win. That's my stance on that. I'm going to put Katakuri here at 2 as well. I think a lot of people are going to brush off the old cat pack. Just because, again, Blackbeard isn't as represented, and he's just never bad. You know, Yellow continually gets good cards. They continually get some of the craziest cards you've ever seen. They got a new 6-turn play with Nico Robin. A lot of different options here. I think it's pretty good. Bonnie. I think Bonnie, you know, a lot of people who play Bonnie, they love Bonnie. They're committed to Bonnie. Bonnie, I think, will have a decent amount, you know, small slice of pie. But I think the people who are going to be piloting Bonnie are going to show out more so than other players. And Bonnie, I think, has a pretty decent matchup into Dofi overall. And as well, like, you know, BY, I think it's pretty good too. And it's just, you know, it's red. Shanks is just red. Bonnie is like what everybody, you know, says and things like that. And so I think it deserves 1.5. I think there's going to be a decent amount of Bonnie representation. Not a huge size, but I do believe, you know, you could play a Bonnie. Now we're going to go ahead and put in Foxy. I included Foxy because Foxy actually made some decent waves in OP09 during their format. Near, like, at interesting points, there's one player who's specifically a big fan. I think his ability is very good against Dofi, and with less Lucci, I think this leader can do very well, just because the biggest and hardest requirement is keeping 3 bodies to be able to use the ability. And, you know, of course, Dofi can bounce a 4, but outside of that, like, most of these other decks aren't playing removal. And so it can be very easy, and you get to freeze 2 and continually freeze 2. So decks that play large drops, you can freeze them forever, and then they're just out of the game. Gives a little bit more, value to like the rushers, but yeah, just freezing 1, and you take it out of the game if it's a large swinger, and then you just turn off Dofi ability. Big fan. Lucci. I think Lucci's still tier 1. Lucci's overall still a very solid deck. I think this is one of the leaders that I didn't get as much practice into as I would have liked, but that's okay. I think a lot of people, that's going to cost a lot of people as well. So I think there's going to be a decent amount of Lucci representation. Deck really doesn't change. Still does the same thing. Tempest's kick is just absolutely hand of bananas. And I think the leader is just overall very solid because you get to go, boom, Rebecca Sabo, and all this, and you just don't lose. Purple Luffy. I'm going to put Purple Luffy at tier 1. I think it's honestly, if I'm being 100% honest, I think it's closer to 1.5, but I think that's unfair based off of the Purple Luffy conversions versus Shanks conversions. I think I just can't rate it that based off of that alone. And so really just kind of want to talk about Luffy. The deck is one of those, again, Shanks is fair. Luffy gets the ramp very quickly, and the downfall of Luffy is if you don't see Luffy Sanji on your 7 on your curve, you're kind of like behind. Just because that combo guarantees that you're going to keep one body, unless you're playing against Lucci and they like double Ice Age play Lucci, which, what can you do? But outside of that, very good. Spits out those bodies. You can play 10 Luffy. You've got the new 9 Rush Luffy, which replaces value. You've got Gum Giant. And one of the ways that I think about Gum Giant is your opponent has 6 cards. They got 1 Don up. If you're going for lethal, you're not going for lethal against a 6-card hand. You're going against lethal against an 8-card hand because they're going to use 2 to counter 9, and they get 2 right back. And so they really have, 2 extra cards. So, like, when they have, 6 in hand with a giant, they really have an 8-card hand is the way that I like to look at it. It gives you a good idea of, like, the math that you actually have to go through. But Gum Giant is the craziest card in the game. And he gets to leverage that. So, it's a huge value play. It gets you out of a big attack. And you can play 9 Lin and heal. So I think he's tier 1. I think there's going to be a little bit less size of pie than what we see here, but I still think a very strong representation. People love Luffy, of course, main character, all that going for him. And then let's talk RP Luffy. I'm actually going to put RP Luffy at tier 1. I think we're going to see a number of these in Top Cut. I would not be surprised. This just does what Shanks wants to do, but better, but at the cost of 3 life. You're 6k leader, but you essentially have hockey on every single swing because they have to attach 1 Don for it to go through and command a 1k. Makes it a lot harder for things like Doflamingo to put pressure on you. And then you get Gum Giant. You're ramping super quick. You can hit, you hit 8, you go 9. Boom. Like, you just have to find your way to 8, you go 9. You're at 9, you go 10. Play a 10 drop. Play a 9 drop. And you have 10 Shanks. Access to 10 Shanks, so then you create a 2k deficit right off the bat. Whereas this is like a 1, now it's a 2. And they have to swing up to 6. And you have Gum Giant. And you've got Newgate. I think this leader is very, very underappreciated, and it's going to catch a lot of people off guard because, again, it's a better Shanks. This has a way better win rate against Shanks just because it's doing everything that Shanks wants to do at 3 life, and then they just go down the 1, and you can never get rid of that 1. Blackbeard. I'm going to put Blackbeard here in the 1.5. Blackbeard hasn't really made a splash. We see here he didn't make it in the top 32. And then when we look over here, the size of pie for the top 16 is only 1. So, and that's a smaller event. And he's not doing a lot so far. I do think that means he can catch a lot of people off guard. But I do think that this is just one of those, I think a lot of people are going off of it, going to Lucci, doing this or, Smoker or that. I think, of course the leader is good, but I don't know if he gets Kuzan next set, which is the craziest card I think Bandai has ever printed. I say that a lot, but Kuzan is a very strong card because he can't be answered. He gets the swing, and then he gets the generate value. So very, very scary stuff. And then, I think he makes a name for himself in OP10, but I don't know. I don't think he's going to have, I think he's going to still, I think any one of these leaders I'm mentioning here could be in the top 64 or top cut section. Rightfully so. It's a super diverse format. It's super interesting because so many decks are viable right now, which we love to see versus like a cookie cutter format. And then I'm going to put PB Luffy here as well. Again, this leader hasn't been converting as much as I think people would like. I think a big part of that is, our big players are playing a lot of these. Everybody's been locked in on Nats, not really been dabbling, trying to discover new things. We're all just trying to, get our testing in for Nats and really just figure all of that out. I think that's a big part. I do think the leader's good. I think he's like 1.52. He's a 4-life leader, which makes it very hard in a landscape with a ton of Doflamingo. But you do have, of course, similar to Smoker, you have access to that Sanji. Same with this Luffy. And Sanji goes a really long way. Enel. I'm going to put Enel at 2. But again, like Yellow's win con is luck. Yellow has a pure win con of just luck. And so, Enel can just luck sack their way to the end. If you're the luckiest guy in the room, again, you're probably winning. I think, everybody loves Enel. People are tried and true. He's never bad just because he's like a 7-life leader. And I think there's going to be an okay amount of them there. I think he's definitely going to have some representation. And so it'll be very interesting to see. I think, again, maybe like 1-2 in the top cut. But then, maybe they make it to like the later rounds. Jonas, I'm watching for you. The Nami, I'm going to put Nami at 1.5. Nami is a very good leader. We all know this. Nami is a very good leader. Nami is really good in a sword format. You got cards like leaders like Doflamingo, I think, are very good into Nami just because they're aggro and pudding. Which, of course, blue, Nami's biggest weakness has always been rush red and blue. Because you can bot deck, you can pudding, and just all those things that set Nami back. And then you, of course, have Teach. Teach, heck of a card, too. You can go wide while also establishing and, putting on pressure. So, absolutely crazy. But I do think, we're going to see Nami. Adam Cisneros. Cisneros, did I say your name right? If not, I'm so sorry, buddy. Looking forward to meeting you at Nats. But I think, we could definitely see a Nami in the top cut. Vegapunk. I'm going to put Vegapunk 1.5, but I really think it's right between these two. Mostly because Vegapunk is really good, like, into Dofi, which was, like, the big thing and why Vegapunk kind of had a moment in 09, or in 08, or 8.5. And we really kind of see that because they get to spit out a bunch of bodies for cheap, similar to Dofi, but they, of course, have the 1 cost, or the 5-drop Luffy, which generates value and removes a threat on Dofi's side. And then, of course, the Nami as well, which, again, removes a threat. So, I think Vegapunk wouldn't surprise me. But I don't know if he is, like, going to be in there. Like, all of these, I think, could be in Top Cut, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't make it. You know what I'm saying? But all of these, I think, again, every leader here has an opportunity at Top Cut. I think these are all leaders that, we might play against. Now I'm going to say Uda. I think Uda's really interesting. I've been seeing a couple people playing with Uda. I'm Invincible is a very good card, and you get access to the film engine. You can play a lot of 2Ks, and you're going to add a card every turn. Again, downfall, of course, is Doflamingo, but it lets you counter out, and you're going to draw 2 cards pretty much every turn. So you counter out of a 7, draw 2, counter out of a 7, draw 2. And you can play Eustace. Eustace is a big card for that matchup, and Dofi has a hard time with it. TBD if people are going to go ahead and tech in a Red Rock in Dofi or in just their blue decks overall, like trying to deal with those like larger threats you see from Shanks and from Blackbeard. And then Zoro. Zoro's the last leader I am going to mention here. I'm going to put him at 2 as well because, again, Zoro's really efficient, and that's like always what he's been, is a value leader that does very aggro, very face hitting, and I think he's like the best at doing what he does. And it would not surprise me to see, like, you know, one Zoro in top 64. I think these right here are all the leaders that we could see. I'm sorry if a leader you thought isn't mentioned. I don't believe I missed any that, like, in my heart of hearts, I think could make it there. Truthfully, you know, like, Marco is one top of mind. Maybe Calgara, but, you know, Gravity Blade kind of folds Calgara. And I think just Dofi overall does. Maybe I'm wrong, but as always, if you found this content of value, you can hit the subscribe button. Let me know if you guys are going to Nationals, what you think is going to be the deck that wins it in the comments below, and I'll see y'all in the next one.